it's going quite to be difficult not to repeat actually what's been said, because most of the trends I'm going to talk about actually are still just at their infancy, if I could say right now. So first, actually, on an end user perspective, we're going to look at content actually, because as we said, in terms of voice, even in terms of end user, voice in Africa will still remain the main revenue generator for a long time, and also the main usage. We recently, actually just in September, reached about 500 million SIM cards, not people, obviously, SIM cards, mobile SIM cards in circulation across the continent. Out of this, we estimate actually that probably 80% are people. But what they do mainly is voice, and what they're still going to continue to do is voice, mainly because of revenues. For example, people do what they need to do first, actually. They don't spend a lot in telecommunication services just for what some can afford leisure, but we are in an environment where which is dominated by low income. So, however, as Mamadou said earlier, the revenues generated because of competition, there's a lot of pressure on the revenues and mainly the profit generated by those services. So what we're going to see growing on the content side is, as for instance, as Mamadou said, mobile money, which is just starting not just starting right now, because we mentioned M-Pesa, which started earlier, but also in countries like South Africa. MTN had launched mobile money a long time ago, but I think that the shift, or what has happened, is that the operators are now more modeling their services based on what their customers really want. It's not a matter of looking what's happening in an advanced country and then come back here and repeat the same thing. So the revolution brought, for instance, by M-Pesa in Kenya and now in other markets, is that prior to M-Pesa, we had what were people called mobile banking, whereby the operator just thought of what was done actually in Europe, bringing the existing mobile services to the end users. Forgetting that, well, not forgetting, but not taking into consideration that most of their subscribers first were unbanked, and maybe fancy bank services were not something that they were interested in, just because probably they couldn't afford it. That was not in their mindset. But the revolution with M-Pesa was actually just being a facilitator. Actually, you have an e-wallet whereby actually you do whatever you want to do, and what is it that people want to do is to move money fast to either the relative or to do business. So in terms of mobile content, or even in terms of mobile services, this is where we see the highest growth in terms of uptake. Now, in terms of revenues to operators, mobile money doesn't bring much in terms of revenue. First, most of the operators, the M-Pesa or the others, did not usually use that as a, how can I say, just as a, not customer loyalty tool. Initially, it was like a customer loyalty tool. Plus, in most of the markets, the operator is actually the facade, but they're not the financial institution who is licensed to provide the service. So it doesn't, for the operators for the moment, it doesn't bring that much money. It's still actually a chunk of money, but obviously it doesn't bring that much money, because they have obviously to share the commission between themselves, between the agents, and also between the bank. So the good opportunity for the bank is to extend its coverage to people they would have never reached before, just because actually they were in an underserved area, or just because actually the banks, and I think in Africa the banks actually, probably not in South Africa, but in the rest of Africa, I think they're quite demanding in terms of opening an account, especially to the low-end segment. So that kind of population wouldn't have a bank account before. So that's mainly actually for mobile content. Another, probably not mobile content, something that I'm going to combine with, as we were talking about infrastructure, is, as we said, broadband. Not only mobile broadband, just broadband, broadband access, or telecommunications access. As my predecessors just said, now the telecommunication networks are becoming a platform whereby a lot of service providers are going to, which actually a lot of service providers are going to use to provide various types of services. Broadband access is growing fast, obviously, for end users wanting to access the internet. I think that the main usage for the internet is to interact in terms of receiving and sending email and social networks, and also for those who work actually for work purposes as well. So broadband is needed for internet access, but also for other services which are going to gain ground across Africa, such as telemedicine, for instance, e-health, and e-education as well. And we're going to have like e-everything. So especially we have a lot of underserved or rural areas whereby some facilities, actually medical facilities or even education facilities, are not as advanced in the cities. So that was actually mainly for the broadband access. And then another thing I'm going to repeat as well is the infrastructure. So infrastructure sharing, yes, actually we've seen operators looking at reducing their OPEX and therefore looking at the need to share infrastructure, and especially again in underserved areas. So probably one key aspect as well I'm going to mention for future growth of telecommunication is the connection of underserved or rural areas. Sometimes I don't like using rural only, because you can be actually in a city or in a relatively non-rural area but still be underserved for various reasons. So the connection of underserved area, which initially for operators are not considered as profitable. So therefore they have to take into account alternative solution to reach such population. There is probably something that we haven't mentioned before, which what we mentioned as well, is green energy. To be honest, right now operators are not that much investing in green energy, and we, as probably observers, most feel like it's used as a marketing, tool. They have a few pilot projects here and there, but as we were talking about infrastructure sharing, for instance, this also can be a way in the future to, even if they invest now, in the future to also reduce the cost of operation. We'll have to take into account that for most sub-Saharan Africa, we do not produce enough power, which means that a lot of the population does not have access to electricity on a regular basis. And also this means that the networks, most of the networks have to be off-grid, which is that they are powered with diesel generators, which is expensive in terms of, obviously, it's now the operators will depend on the price of diesel, but also in terms of security that you have to deploy around the site for people not probably to steal from that particular site, either steal diesel or other things. So I think there will be probably a bit more to look into in terms of green energies using wind power wind power base stations or solar panel base stations. There are a few companies which are in partnership with bigger vendors developing that for operators for their networks, which are, as we said, off-grid, not powered by mainstream electricity.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.